The cabin froze when Amanda Lewis raised her hand and blocked the aisle. Not gently, not politely. Her palm came up like a stop sign inches from his chest, sharp and final, cutting the quiet of first class in half. Conversations died mid-sentence. A champagne flute hovered, forgotten, trembling slightly in an older man's grip. Somewhere behind the partition, a cart rattled, metal on metal, then went still. "Sir," Amanda said, her voice tight with practiced authority, "you need to step back. This cabin is reserved." The man did not move. Marcus Reed stood there, tall, shoulders relaxed, hoodie unzipped just enough to show a plain grey T-shirt underneath. No logo, no flash. His carry-on was old leather, scuffed at the corners, the kind of bag that had seen real miles. He looked past Amanda, not through her. Past her. Eyes steady, unreadable. He had the calm of someone who had learned that reacting too fast only gave power away. A few rows up, Richard Holloway leaned into the aisle, his expensive suit creasing as he craned his neck. "What's the hold-up?" he barked, irritation slurred with the last of his pre-flight scotch. "We're boarding or we're not. Some of us paid for peace and quiet." Amanda didn't look back at him. She didn't need to. She already felt his presence like a warm light at her back, approving, entitled, familiar. Her attention stayed locked on Marcus. She let her gaze travel deliberately. Hoodie, sneakers, the worn bag. Her jaw tightened. "This is first class," she said again, slower now, as if speaking to a child. "Zone 4 boards later. You'll need to wait." A beat passed, then another. The hum of the plane seemed louder in the pause. "I'm in first class," Marcus said. His voice was low, even, not defensive, not loud. He reached into his pocket and lifted his phone, screen glowing. The boarding pass filled the display. Seat 1B. Amanda didn't scan it. She didn't even lean closer. Her eyes flicked to the screen and back to his face, already dismissing what it showed. She felt a familiar, unwelcome prickle of irritation. People tried things. Every day. Fake passes, screenshots, confidence as camouflage. "May I see your identification?" she asked. The question landed heavy. A woman across the aisle stiffened, her smile faltering. A younger man near the window lowered his headphones, one ear exposed now, listening. Marcus's eyebrow lifted a fraction. "Is that standard?" he asked quietly. "You didn't ask the gentleman before me." Amanda's lips curved, thin and precise. "Mr. Holloway is a known traveler," she said smoothly without turning. "Random checks are at my discretion." She held out her hand. For a moment, Marcus studied her. Not with anger, with something cooler. Assessment. Then he exhaled through his nose, a short breath, and reached into his jacket. The passport slid into her palm, navy blue, edges worn. United States. Amanda flipped it open, her movements quick, almost aggressive. She scanned the name. Marcus Reed. The pages were thick with stamps. London, Tokyo, Dubai, Zurich. Dates scattered across years, not weeks. She felt the irritation sharpen. This wasn't the travel history of someone trying to sneak into a seat. She closed the passport and handed it back, the motion brisk. The scanner beeped when she finally passed his phone under it. A clean, confirming sound she hated hearing. "Right this way," she said, stepping aside with clipped efficiency. "Please be mindful of noise. Our clientele values privacy." Marcus met her eyes for a second longer than necessary. His gaze didn't challenge. It weighed. "I'm sure they do," he said, and walked past her down the jet bridge. As his back disappeared, Amanda's shoulders stayed rigid. She turned sharply toward the galley where Jessica, the junior attendant, hovered with the manifest pressed to her chest. "Watch him," Amanda hissed under her breath. "Seat 1B. I don't want problems tonight." Jessica glanced after Marcus, uncertainty flickering across her face. "He seemed polite," she said. "System shows he paid full fare." "Cash," Amanda snapped. 2 hours before departure. People who do that are never simple." The boarding continued, but the tone had shifted. The air felt thinner. Amanda's smile snapped back into place as Richard Holloway lumbered past, his cologne heavy, his laugh louder than necessary. He slapped his boarding pass against her hand without looking at her face. "Make sure my seat works this time," he grunted. "Last flight was a joke." "Of course, Mr. Holloway," Amanda said, her voice warm now, almost musical. "Your scotch will be waiting." He grinned, satisfied, and disappeared into the cabin. Marcus reached his seat and stowed his bag with care, lifting it gently into the bin instead of shoving it like the others. He sat, buckled in, and declined the champagne with a small shake of his head, asking for sparkling water instead. He pulled a hardcover book from his hoodie pocket, the pages already creased from use, and opened it as if the world around him were background noise. Across the aisle, Richard Holloway was already complaining. "This thing doesn't recline," he shouted, jabbing the controls. "What am I paying for?" Amanda appeared instantly, bending close, her hair brushing his shoulder as she reset the seat. The mechanism hummed and lowered. Holloway laughed and rolled his wrist, the diamonds on his watch catching the cabin lights, scattering them across the ceiling. "Beautiful, right?" he said, holding it out. "Custom piece. Only a few in the world. Cost me 400,000. Amanda's breath hitched despite herself. The watch was obscene, heavy. Power distilled into metal and light. She imagined the weight of it on her own wrist, imagined what it would erase. "You should be careful," she said softly. "I always am," Holloway laughed. He unclasped it and set it on the small table beside his drink. "It needs air." The plane pushed back. The engines roared, a rising thunder that pressed everyone into their seats. As the aircraft climbed, the city lights fell away, and first class settled into its familiar hush. Service began. Amanda floated from seat to seat, refilling glasses before they emptied, laughing at jokes that weren't funny. When she passed Marcus, her demeanor hardened. She dropped his napkin without a word. The water hit the glass with a sharp glug. He didn't look up. 2 hours later, the lights dimmed. Holloway snored, mouth open, his drink tipped slightly, the watch still gleaming on the table. Amanda sat in the galley, scrolling through images of lives she wanted, heels kicked off, feet aching. She stood, smoothing her uniform, and walked the aisle for a cabin check. She paused by Holloway's seat. The watch sat there, unattended. Her eyes flicked left, right, down the aisle. Marcus slept, book on his chest, headphones loose around his neck. Amanda's fingers twitched. The plane hit a pocket of rough air. A jolt. Carts rattled. A curse from Holloway as his drink spilled. The moment fractured the calm, drawing eyes, voices. And in that fracture, something irreversible shifted. Because when Holloway's shout cut through the cabin a minute later, raw with panic, Amanda's heart was already racing. "My watch!" he yelled. "Where is my watch?" Every head turned, and Amanda Lewis knew, with a certainty that chilled her bones, exactly where every eye would land next. The silence after Richard Holloway's shout was worse than the noise itself. "My watch," he said again, louder now, panic stripping the slur from his voice. It was right here. Amanda Lewis moved before anyone else could. Her heels clicked fast, sharp, decisive, slicing down the aisle as if speed itself proved innocence. She dropped to one knee beside Holloway's seat, eyes scanning the floor, the cushions, the narrow space between pod and aisle. Nothing. The empty table stared back at her like an accusation. "Sir, please stay seated," she said, already knowing he wouldn't listen. Holloway stood anyway, face flushing a deep, angry red. He patted the tablecloth, then the seat, then the inside of his jacket, like the watch might have crawled there on its own. "I put it here," he snapped. "I remember unclasping it. Don't tell me it just vanished." The cabin lights brightened abruptly. A ripple of unease moved through first class. People straightened in their seats, eyes sharpened. Privacy dissolved. David Miller, the purser, hurried in from the business class, tie already loosened, voice calm but tight. "What's going on?" "My watch was stolen," Holloway said, jabbing a finger at the empty table. $400,000. Gone. Amanda felt the word stolen settle into the air, heavy, final. Her pulse thudded in her ears. She straightened slowly, letting the moment stretch just long enough. Long enough to be seen. Long enough to be believed. "David," she said, lowering her voice, but not enough to keep the front rows from hearing. There was a passenger awake while Mr. Holloway was sleeping. She didn't look anywhere yet. She let the idea form first. "I noticed movement," she continued. "Someone standing near this suite." Holloway's head snapped up. "Who?" Amanda turned. Across the aisle, Marcus Reed sat upright now, headphones removed, his expression composed, eyes steady as the cabin around him tilted toward hysteria. He didn't shrink. He didn't protest. His hands rested open on his thighs, empty. "There," Amanda said softly, but the word cut clean. "Seat 1. B." A murmur spread, quick and poisonous. A woman in the second row leaned toward her seatmate, whispering. A man near the window frowned, gaze flicking from Marcus to the empty table and back again, recalculating. Holloway stepped into the aisle, towering, unsteady. "You," he roared. "You took it." Marcus looked up at him, unflinching. "I haven't left my seat," he said. His voice was calm, almost gentle, which somehow made the accusation feel sharper. "And I didn't touch your watch." "Don't lie to me," Holloway shouted, lunging forward until David caught his arm. "I saw you watching it." "You were asleep," Marcus said evenly. The words landed like a slap. David tightened his grip on Holloway and turned to Amanda. "Are you sure?" Amanda didn't hesitate. She straightened her back, squared her shoulders. This was the moment, the one she would be remembered for. "Yes," she said. "I'm sure." He was leaning over the suite, adjusting his bag right after. She pointed upward. The overhead bin above Marcus's seat sat slightly ajar, the zipper of the battered leather bag visible through the gap. A few heads turned toward it. Someone inhaled sharply. Marcus followed their gaze. For the first time since boarding, something flickered across his face. Not fear. Disappointment. A quiet, heavy kind. "You're making a mistake," he said. Amanda's mouth tightened. "The only mistake was letting you on this plane," she shot back, the professionalism draining from her tone. "David, I want that bag checked." Holloway seized on it instantly. "Search him. Now." "We can't search a passenger without consent or law enforcement," David said, glancing around, acutely aware of the phones being raised now. Subtle, angled, recording. "I consent," Marcus said. The cabin went still. He stood slowly, unfolding to his full height, careful not to loom, careful not to give anyone the satisfaction of fear. He met Amanda's eyes as he reached up and pulled the bag from the bin himself, setting it on the empty seat beside him. "Check it," he said. "But when you don't find it, remember this." Amanda felt a chill run under her uniform. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't pleaded, and somehow that unnerved her more than shouting ever could. She grabbed the zipper and yanked it open. Too hard. The sound tore through the quiet. She plunged her hands inside, movements quick, almost frantic. Clothes, a laptop, toiletries. Nothing. Her heart hammered. She dug deeper, fingers brushing something wrapped tight in fabric at the bottom. Her breath caught. She pulled it free, holding the sock aloft like a trophy. "What's this?" Marcus stared at it, confusion plain, unperformed. "I don't know." Amanda tipped the sock upside down. The watch slid out, heavy, unmistakable, diamonds scattering light across the cabin as it clanged onto the tray table. A collective gasp swept the space. "There it is!" Holloway screamed, wild with vindication. "You thief!" Amanda crossed her arms, triumph flooding her veins. She felt tall, powerful. "Right." "Captain has already radioed ahead," she said, voice ringing. "Police will be waiting at the gate." "Good," Marcus said quietly. He sat back down, reached for his book, and opened it again, as if the world hadn't just tilted beneath him. "Make sure they bring a detective." The words hung there, strange and out of place. The cabin transformed. What had been luxury curdled into something sour. Amanda moved through it with a new swagger, stopping by Holloway's seat every few minutes, offering towels, sympathy, refills. She spoke loudly, enough for others to hear. "I'm so sorry you're dealing with this. We have him contained." Holloway basked, polishing the watch obsessively. "I want him banned," he slurred. "Lifetime. I know people." Across the aisle, Marcus sat alone. The hedge fund manager in 2A avoided his eyes. The socialite beside him shook her head in quiet disgust. Amanda noticed and encouraged it with a look, a sigh, a subtle shake of her head. The story was set now. The man in the hoodie had infiltrated their space. When Marcus unbuckled his belt and stood, she was there in an instant, blocking the aisle. "Sit down. I need the restroom," he said. "Captain's orders," she lied. Suspects remain seated. Marcus looked past her at the sealed door, then back at her face. "We're at 38,000 feet. Don't get smart," she snapped, "or I'll have you restrained." A flicker of unease crossed her despite herself when he held her gaze, eyes analytical, distant, like she was an object under glass. Then he sat. In the galley, Jessica hovered, pale. "Tiff," she whispered, "are we allowed to do this?" Amanda checked her reflection, applied a fresh coat of red lipstick. He was caught with the watch. Physical evidence. End of story. Jessica swallowed and nodded. As the plane descended, the mood tightened further. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, instructing everyone to remain seated. When the wheels touched down, a ripple of anticipation moved through first class, ugly and eager. The door opened. Cold air rushed in. 4 officers stepped aboard, followed by 2 men in plain suits. "That's him," Amanda said, stepping forward, chin high. "Seat 1B." Marcus closed his book, placed it gently in his bag, and stood. He did not resist as they cuffed him, the metallic click echoing through the cabin. As they led him past Amanda, she leaned in, whispering, "Enjoy prison." He paused just long enough to look at her. "There won't be a next time for you," he said. She watched him go, satisfaction blooming, unaware that every step he took off that plane was carrying her closer to a truth she had already decided could never touch her. The police van smelled like wet concrete and old vinyl, the kind of institutional odor that never quite leaves your clothes. Amanda Lewis sat upright on the narrow bench, knees together, hands folded neatly in her lap, replaying the cabin scene in her head with a private, almost giddy satisfaction. She was still wearing her uniform. She had chosen not to change. Uniforms mattered. They signaled authority. They told people who to believe. Across from her, Richard Holloway slumped against the metal wall, breath sour with alcohol, clutching his wrist like the watch might disappear again if he loosened his grip. "I've got a meeting in the city," he muttered. "This better be quick." "It's just procedure," Amanda said brightly. "They need statements, evidence. You did the right thing speaking up." Holloway grunted, unconvinced, already irritated by the inconvenience of accountability. They were led through a side entrance at Heathrow, down a long corridor where the echo of footsteps felt too loud, too exposed. No crowds, no cameras. Not yet. Amanda noticed that. She liked it. Quiet meant control. The interview room was smaller than she expected. Grey walls, a metal table bolted to the floor, 2 chairs, a camera in the corner with a single red light pulsing slowly, patiently. Detective Inspector Paul Harrington sat opposite her, sleeves rolled, pen resting loosely between his fingers. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. His face gave nothing away. "Miss Lewis," he said, voice level. British accent clipped, but not unkind. "Let's go through this carefully." "Of course," Amanda said. "I'm happy to help." She told the story again, how she had noticed Marcus Reed lingering, how she had trusted her instincts, how she had seen him near Holloway's seat. She used the word suspicious more than once. Harrington didn't interrupt. He didn't write much either. That unsettled her slightly. "And you found the watch in his bag," Harrington said. "Yes," Amanda replied, nodding. "Wrapped in a sock at the bottom." And before that moment, Harrington asked, "You had not touched the watch?" Amanda blinked once. Number Harrington leaned back, chair creaking softly. "We've processed the item for fingerprints." She smiled, confident. "You'll find his." "We found Mr. Holloway's," Harrington said, "and several partials on the sock." Amanda's smile tightened. "Well, I handled the sock." "Yes," Harrington said. "We also found yours." Her breath caught, barely perceptible. "Of course you did." "I took it out." He studied her for a long second, then almost casually, "Inside the sock." The words landed wrong. Inside. Not on the outside. Inside. She felt a prickle of heat at the base of her neck. "I searched the bag," she said quickly. "That's how. We also found traces of your perfume," Harrington continued, still calm, "on the interior lining of Mr. Reed's bag." The room felt smaller. The camera's red light blinked. Amanda laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "I was leaning over the bag. I opened it. Of course my scent would be there." Harrington didn't respond. He reached for a remote on the table and pressed a button. The wall behind him flickered to life. Footage filled the screen. Grainy, monochrome, night vision. The first-class cabin, dimmed. Holloway asleep, mouth open, watch gleaming on the table. Amanda leaned forward despite herself. On the screen, she appeared, walking down the aisle. She stopped, looked left, looked right. Then her hand reached out. She snatched the watch. The room went dead quiet. Amanda's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The video continued. Her on-screen self slipped the watch into the deep pocket of her apron and walked away, posture relaxed, unhurried. "That timestamp," Harrington said softly, "shows 2:14 in the morning." Amanda shook her head, panic surging now. "That's not what it looks like." The footage jumped forward. Turbulence. Holloway waking. Chaos. Then another angle. Amanda near the overhead bins. The moment everyone was distracted. Her hand slid from her apron into the open zipper of Marcus Reed's bag. Harrington paused the video. "That," he said, "is theft. And framing. And filing a false police report." Amanda collapsed back into the chair. The uniform that had felt like armor now pressed against her skin, too tight. too heavy. "I panicked," she whispered. "I was trying to protect the passenger." "You were protecting yourself," Harrington replied. She buried her face in her hands. "Please," she sobbed. "I've worked for that airline for over a decade. I made one mistake." Harrington stood. "Mr. Reed is waiting outside." Her head snapped up. "I don't want to see him." "You don't have a choice," Harrington said. "He's requested to speak with you." The door opened. Marcus Reed stepped in, and the room changed. He was no longer wearing the hoodie. The suit was dark, tailored perfectly, the kind of fit that spoke quietly of power and money without begging for attention. His posture was relaxed, controlled. Behind him, a cameraman entered, shoulder rig steady, red recording light burning bright. Amanda stared at him, mascara streaked, face blotchy, unrecognizable even to herself. "You didn't mind an audience before," Marcus said. His voice was calm, colder than before. "I thought we'd keep things consistent." She shook her head, tears spilling. "Please, don't film this." He pulled out a chair and sat, facing her fully now. "You wanted to be seen. You wanted to be the hero." The camera hummed softly. Marcus leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. 3 weeks ago, I was hired to audit this airline. Complaints, patterns, behavior that only showed up on certain routes, under certain supervisors. Amanda's chest tightened. "You were one of them," he said. "An outlier, a statistical anomaly." He slid a folder across the table. Thick, heavy. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. "Tonight," Marcus continued, "you saw a black man in a hoodie sitting where you believed he didn't belong, and you decided to remove him. I was protecting. You were protecting a lie," he cut in, "and you used my skin color to do it." Silence stretched. The camera watched. The room bore witness. "You tried to put me in prison," Marcus said quietly. "For 10 years. Do you understand that?" She nodded, broken. "You wanted to be the gatekeeper," he went on. "Consider the gate closed." He stood, straightened his jacket, and turned to Harrington. "Proceed." As Marcus walked out, Amanda slumped in the chair, the weight of it finally crushing her. Outside the room, phones were already buzzing. The story was moving now, faster than she could ever outrun, and for the first time, she understood something she never had at 30,000 feet. The truth does not need permission to land. Amanda Lewis did not leave Heathrow that night. She sat in a holding cell that smelled of bleach and old water, the concrete bench cold through the thin fabric of her uniform pants. The wings pinned to her lapel had been taken, removed gently, almost apologetically, by a young officer who wouldn't meet her eyes. Without them, the uniform felt like a costume worn too long after the play had ended. Time lost its shape. Hours bled together under the flicker of fluorescent lights that never dimmed. She replayed the footage in her head until the images burned. Her hand reaching, the watch flashing, the bag unzipping. Every rationalization she had built collapsed under the weight of recorded truth. When they finally released her, It wasn't to cameras or crowds. It was to a grey dawn and a single figure waiting by a dented hatchback at the curb. Mark, her boyfriend. His jaw was tight, eyes forward, hands locked on the steering wheel. "Get in," he said, flat. She slid into the passenger seat, clutching a manila envelope like it might anchor her to reality. He pulled away without another word. The city blurred past, rain streaking the windshield. London reduced to a wash of grey. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. Once, twice, then continuously, a frantic pulse she couldn't ignore. She unlocked it. Notifications poured in faster than she could read. Missed calls, messages, tags. The footage had been released, raw, unedited. Her face frozen mid-lie, mid-reach, mid-betrayal. The airline's statement followed, clipped and unforgiving. Zero tolerance. Immediate termination. Cooperation with authorities. Mark slammed his palm against the wheel. "Do you have any idea what you did?" She opened her mouth, closed it. There was nothing left that sounded true. By the time they reached the flat, her name was already toxic. Hashtags trended. Memes multiplied. Her smile beside Holloway's smug approval contrasted against her mugshot released hours later. The internet did what it always did. It excavated her past with surgical enthusiasm. Old complaints surfaced. Stories from passengers she barely remembered. Patterns she had dismissed as coincidence now read like a confession written over years. She stopped going outside. The curtains stayed drawn. Mark slept on the couch for 2 nights, then stopped sleeping there at all. On the 3rd morning, he stood in the doorway with a duffel bag. "They're calling," he said. "My job. My family. I can't be tied to this." She nodded. He left without another word. Legal proceedings moved with brutal efficiency. Her lawyer spoke in measured tones about plea deals and suspended sentences, about community service and restitution that would erase her savings, and then some. Holloway filed his own suit, eager to distance himself, claiming emotional distress. The man she had tried to protect didn't remember her name. She sold everything that wasn't bolted down. The car, the handbags, even the knock-off watch she had once polished with such care. The pawnshop clerk laughed when she offered it. Eviction followed. Quiet. Procedural. Final. 6 months later, Manchester rain soaked through her jacket as she hurried past the bus station, collar pulled up, eyes down. Anonymity had become her refuge. Here, no one looked twice. No one recognized the fallen gatekeeper of the sky. The bell above the door chimed as she entered Burger Baron, the smell of grease and sugar clinging to everything. The lights buzzed overhead, relentless. Kyle, the shift manager, barely looked up from the register. "You're late again, Lewis," he said. "Fryer. Lunch rush." She tied on her apron without protest. The heat hit her like a wall as she stepped into the kitchen. Her hands, once manicured, were red and raw. She lowered a basket of frozen fries into the oil. The hiss was violent, unforgiving. A small television hung in the corner, volume low. She glanced up only because a familiar cadence caught her ear. Calm, measured, controlled. Marcus Reed stood at a podium on the screen, wind tugging at his suit. A banner behind him bore the airline's logo, refreshed, brighter. The caption scrolled beneath his face. Record profits, new leadership. Today, he was saying, marks a shift. We are launching the Open Skies Scholarship. £10 million committed to training pilots and engineers from communities historically locked out of this industry. The camera panned across a crowd of young faces, diverse, hopeful, looking up at him with something close to belief. The sky belongs to everyone, Marcus continued, not just those who look the part. Amanda's throat tightened. The Fryer timer shrieked. Kyle shouted her name. She jolted, oil splattering, a sharp sting on her forearm. She didn't react, just lifted the basket, dumped the fries, salted them with a hand that trembled only slightly. "Order up," she whispered, though no one heard. That night, alone in her rented room, she lay staring at the ceiling, the hum of traffic outside a dull roar. She thought of the cabin at altitude, the illusion of control. The way she had believed her uniform made her right. She thought of Marcus's eyes when she blocked the aisle. Not angry, measuring. Power, she realized too late, had been sitting quietly across from her the entire time. She had mistaken noise for authority, appearance for truth. Her phone buzzed once more, a notification she hadn't turned off. The video had crossed 50 million views, comments still pouring in. She turned the phone face down. The sky was very far away now, and somewhere above the clouds, doors she once guarded were opening wider than she had ever allowed them to be. The story refused to die. Weeks passed, then months, and still Amanda Lewis felt it trailing her like a shadow she couldn't outrun. Every time she thought the world had finally moved on, it resurfaced somewhere new, a late-night talk show clip, a panel discussion on cable news, a training seminar clip leaked online with her name blurred but her face unmistakable. Flight 909 became shorthand, a case study, a warning. She stopped searching her name, but it didn't matter. People recognized her anyway, not with certainty, but with suspicion. A pause too long at the checkout, a glance that lingered, a frown that formed without words. She learned to keep her head down, to speak only when spoken to make herself smaller than she had ever allowed before. Work became routine in the dullest sense of the word. Clock in, fryer, register, clock out. The grease smell never quite left her hair. The uniform clung to her skin, no matter how many times she washed it. At night, her arms ached in ways flying never had. Physical labor demanded honesty. You couldn't posture your way through it. Sometimes, during slow hours, the television played segments she couldn't escape. Marcus Reed's name appeared often now, spoken with respect, sometimes awe. He testified before committees. He announced new oversight boards, new reporting systems, new training programs that didn't just exist on paper. He spoke about accountability, like it was oxygen, necessary, non-negotiable. Amanda listened when she couldn't help it. He spoke calmly, never raising his voice, never indulging in outrage. That was what unsettled her the most. He didn't need anger. He had facts, Patterns. Proof. One afternoon, a co-worker leaned on the counter beside her, nodding at the screen. "That guy's sharp," he said. "Cleaning house." Amanda said nothing. She focused on wiping down the stainless steel, scrubbing until her reflection blurred. At night, sleep came in fragments. She dreamed of aisles narrowing, of hands reaching, but never quite grasping. She woke with her jaw clenched, the taste of metal in her mouth. Regret wasn't loud. It was persistent. It sat with her at breakfast. It followed her onto the bus. It watched her from every reflective surface. She tried once to write an apology. Sat at the small desk in her room, pen hovering over paper. The words wouldn't settle. Every sentence felt like an excuse wearing borrowed humility. She tore the page in half, then quarters, then smaller pieces until there was nothing left to say. Across the ocean, Marcus Reed walked through terminals with a different weight now. People recognized him, not always by face, but by reputation. Employees straightened when he entered a room. Conversations stopped, not out of fear, out of awareness. He insisted on flying commercial whenever possible. Sat in coach, in business, in first. He watched, listened, took notes. Not to trap people, but to understand them. He met with crews after flights, asked questions that didn't have easy answers. Some were defensive, others relieved. A few cried. He didn't seek revenge. He sought systems that made people like Amanda impossible to ignore, impossible to excuse. He believed most harm lived in routine, not malice. In habits passed down unchallenged, in power left unexamined. The scholarship program launched quietly at first, then all at once. Applications flooded in. Stories poured out. Young people who had never set foot on a plane, who had only seen cockpits in movies, now holding acceptance letters like passports to a different future. Marcus read as many as he could himself. Sometimes, late at night, he thought of the woman in the uniform. Not with anger, with a distant sadness. She had been a symptom, a visible one. Removing her had been necessary, but insufficient. He knew that. Real change moved slower. It required vigilance, memory. Back in Manchester, winter crept in. The cold sharpened everything. Amanda wrapped herself in layers, breath fogging the air as she waited for the bus each morning. She noticed a flyer taped to a pole near the stop. Aviation Open Day. Careers. Scholarships. Her first instinct was to tear it down. Instead, she stared at it until the edges curled in the damp. She wondered what it would feel like to sit in a room and listen. Not as authority, not as gatekeeper, just as someone learning. The thought frightened her more than any courtroom ever had. One evening, as she closed up the restaurant, Kyle tossed her a look. "You're different," he said. "Quieter." She shrugged. "People change." He nodded, uninterested, and flicked off the lights. At home, she stood by the window, watching planes cross the sky, blinking red and white against the dark. Each one traced a path she once controlled, in small ways, careless ways. She thought of the passengers she had dismissed, the ones whose names she never learned. How many moments like that had she erased without consequence, until the day the camera didn't blink? The world outside moved on. New scandals replaced old ones. Attention shifted. But the structures Marcus Reed had put in place held. Complaints were logged, investigated. Patterns flagged. Promotions paused. Power redistributed. Amanda felt none of that directly, but she felt its echo. In the way people spoke now, in the caution, in the questions. One night, she turned on the television and caught the end of an interview. Marcus sat back, hands folded, eyes steady. "We don't need perfect people," he said. "We need accountable systems. And we need to remember that authority without empathy is just another form of negligence." The interviewer nodded. The segment ended. Amanda turned the screen off and sat in the quiet. She thought about negligence, about choice, about how easy it had been to decide who belonged and who didn't, and how hard it was to live without that false certainty. Outside, a plane roared overhead, unseen but present, carrying strangers toward destinations she would never know. For the first time in a long while, she didn't look away. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, folded once, slipped under the door like it didn't want to be seen. Amanda Lewis noticed it only because the paper was heavier than junk mail. Cream-colored. Thick. The return address stopped her cold. Transatlantic Airways, her former employer. Her chest tightened as if the air itself had shifted. She didn't open it right away. She set it on the small table by the window and stood there, listening to the distant sound of traffic, the radiator ticking as it warmed. Her hands shook when she finally broke the seal. It wasn't a legal notice. Not this time. It was an invitation. Mandatory attendance. Restorative Accountability Forum. Pilot program. Former employees. Voluntary participation noted. Transportation stipend provided. Her first instinct was to laugh, a short, bitter sound that died in her throat. They didn't want her back. She knew that. This wasn't forgiveness. This was something else. A reckoning dressed up in corporate language. She almost tore it up. Instead, she folded it carefully and slid it into her jacket pocket. The community center sat on the edge of the city, a low brick building with fluorescent lights and a parking lot patched with old oil stains. Amanda arrived early, standing outside longer than necessary, watching people come and go. Some wore suits. Some wore uniforms she recognized instantly. Others looked like ordinary passengers, the kind she used to categorize in seconds without knowing their names. Inside, the room was arranged in a circle. No podium, no head table. Chairs, all the same height, all the same distance from the center. That detail unsettled her more than anything else. She chose a seat near the wall. The facilitator introduced herself and spoke about listening, about harm, about accountability without spectacle. No cameras, no recording. The words felt careful, deliberate, as if designed not to provoke defense. Amanda kept her eyes on the floor. Then people began to speak. A woman with silver hair described being questioned 3 times about her boarding pass, while her white colleague was offered champagne. A young man talked about being forced to gate-check medical equipment. A couple spoke together, voices shaking, about being escorted off a flight for asking why they were treated differently. Amanda felt each story land like a weight, not because they were new, because they were familiar. When it was her turn, the room went quiet. She felt every eye on her without looking up. The facilitator didn't prompt her, didn't rescue her. "I thought I was protecting the airline," Amanda said finally. Her voice sounded smaller than she remembered. "I told myself I was maintaining standards." She paused, swallowed. "But I was protecting my own comfort, my own assumptions. And I hurt people." The words didn't absolve her. She knew that. They weren't meant to. Across the circle, a man she recognized from the cabin spoke next. The hedge fund manager. He didn't glare. He didn't accuse. He just looked tired. "You never asked me anything," he said. "You never questioned my right to be there. That's the part that stays with you." Amanda nodded. There was nothing to say. When the session ended, she left quietly, the letter's paper now warm in her pocket. Outside, the sky hung low and grey. She felt exposed, stripped, and strangely lighter. That night, she dreamed differently. Not of aisles closing in, but of standing still while others moved past her, their faces indistinct, their voices overlapping. She woke before dawn, heart racing, but without the familiar knot of panic. Weeks followed. She attended more sessions, listened more than she spoke, learned to sit with discomfort without filling it. It didn't make her feel good. It made her feel honest. At Burger Baron, Kyle noticed the change. "You're not angry anymore," he said one evening as they closed. "Whatever that means." She shrugged. "I'm paying attention." He laughed, unconvinced, but kinder than before. One afternoon, a customer recognized her, not loudly, not cruelly. He hesitated at the counter, eyes narrowing as memory clicked into place. "Were you?" he began, then stopped. "Yes," she said quietly. He studied her for a moment, then nodded once and took his tray. No confrontation, no absolution, just acknowledgement. It left her shaken for hours. Across the Atlantic, Marcus Reed stood before a room of senior executives, the air sharp with tension. Reports projected behind him. Numbers, charts, complaints reduced to data points that told a clear story. "This isn't about optics," he said. "It's about trust. And trust is structural." He spoke about incentives, about oversight that didn't depend on whistleblowers risking everything, about cameras that didn't blink. Some faces hardened, others softened. Change never moved uniformly. After the meeting, a young flight attendant approached him, voice trembling. "Thank you," she said, "for making it possible to speak." Marcus nodded. He knew gratitude was fragile. Systems mattered more. That evening, he boarded a late flight, taking a seat near the wing. He watched the crew work, noticed the pauses, the recalibrations. Progress wasn't dramatic. It was incremental, often invisible. That was how it lasted. Back in Manchester, Amanda stood at the bus stop beneath the same flyer she had noticed months earlier. Aviation Open Day. The edges were torn now, weathered. She reached up and smoothed it flat. She didn't belong there. Not anymore. But the idea of learning, of listening from the other side, no longer felt impossible. She boarded the bus as it arrived, taking a seat by the window. As the city rolled past, a plane climbed overhead, engines roaring, vanishing into cloud. For the first time, she didn't feel the urge to look away. She wasn't forgiven. She didn't deserve to be. But she was awake. The invitation came again, this time with a name handwritten at the bottom. Amanda Lewis noticed that first. The ink was blue, slightly uneven, human. Marcus Reed. Her breath caught. She sat at the small table in her rented room, the radiator ticking beside her, the city murmuring beyond the window. The letter wasn't an order. It wasn't a summons. It was a request. A closed door left Aja. He would be speaking at a regional oversight forum. Public, open seating. No cameras permitted inside. There would be a section at the end for questions, not statements. Listening was the point. Amanda folded the letter and unfolded it again, the paper creasing under her fingers. She told herself she didn't belong there. She told herself it would only reopen wounds. She told herself 100 things. Then she put on her jacket. The venue was a converted lecture hall near the university, brick walls holding the heat of too many bodies. The air hummed with low conversation. People filed in carrying notebooks, coats, expectations. Amanda chose a seat near the back, angled toward an aisle in case she needed to leave quickly. Marcus Reed stood at the front without ceremony. No spotlight, no elevated stage. Just a microphone adjusted to his height and a glass of water he barely touched. He waited until the room settled. "I'm not here to tell a story," he began. "I'm here to describe a system." His voice carried easily, calm and controlled. He spoke about data, about complaint clusters, about how power hides in routine. He didn't name her. He didn't need to. The outline of the night on Flight 909 hovered between them like a shared memory that didn't require rehearsal. "Accountability isn't a moment," he said. "It's a structure that holds even when no one is watching." Amanda felt the words land with weight. She took notes without realizing it, her pen moving as if to anchor herself to the room. Around her, heads nodded. Some frowned. A few crossed their arms, defensive. The work, she saw now, wasn't convincing everyone. It was building something that didn't need permission to function. When the questions opened, a man near the front asked about second chances. Another asked about punishment versus reform. Marcus answered without evasion. "Consequences are real," he said. "They have to be. But if the system only knows how to expel, it never learns." Amanda's heart thudded. She raised her hand before she could stop herself. A ripple moved through the room as the microphone reached her. She stood, aware of the familiar heat climbing her neck, the old instinct to perform fighting with something newer and quieter. "My name is Amanda Lewis," she said. The room shifted. Recognition sparked in a few eyes. She didn't look away. "I was the senior attendant on that flight." Silence fell, heavy and attentive. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness," she continued. Her voice trembled, then steadied. "I'm here to ask how accountability works when the damage is already done. When you can't undo it." Marcus met her gaze. Not with judgment, with focus. You don't undo harm, he said. You reduce the chance of repetition. You carry the memory forward. You change what you touch next. She nodded, absorbing it. She sat. Afterward, the room emptied slowly. Conversations formed in clusters. Amanda lingered near the back, unsure whether to leave or stay, the old urge to disappear tugging at her. Marcus approached without entourage, without hesitation. Up close, he looked the same as he had at 38,000 feet. Composed, present. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Thank you for letting me," she replied. They stood there for a moment, the noise of the room fading around them. She expected anger or distance. What she found was boundaries. Clear, firm, not cruel. "I don't need you to like me," he said, as if reading the thought. "And I don't need you to punish yourself. I need you to stay awake." "I am," she said. "Every day." He nodded once. "Then do something with it. Not for me. For the people you'll meet next." He turned to leave. She watched him go, feeling something settle into place. Not relief. Direction. In the weeks that followed, she volunteered where she could. Not visibly. Not publicly. She helped organize transportation for scholarship candidates visiting the city. She sat quietly in classrooms during training sessions, taking notes she wasn't required to take. She learned the difference between authority and service in rooms where no one knew her history. Burger Baron remained her job. The friar remained unforgiving. But the work no longer felt like a sentence. It felt like a flaw. Solid, honest. One evening, a young woman with a backpack and tired eyes lingered at the counter. "Do you know how to get to the aviation center?" she asked. "I'm here for an interview." Amanda pointed her in the right direction, then paused. "You've got this," she added softly. The woman smiled, surprised, and left. At home that night, Amanda stood by the window again, watching planes cross the sky. She no longer imagined herself inside them. She imagined the systems that carried them, the people who kept them honest, the work that never showed up in glossy brochures. The past did not loosen its grip. It didn't have to. It only needed to stop steering. Somewhere above the clouds, roots shifted. Quietly. Permanently. And on the ground, Amanda Lewis learned how to live with the weight of what she had done without letting it turn her back toward sleep again. The first snow fell the morning Amanda Lewis received the email from a stranger. No subject line, just a name and a question. It had been forwarded through 3 addresses before reaching her, each pass thinning the distance between past and present. The sender was a woman named Denise Carter. She wrote that she had been on a flight years ago, not 909. Another route, another night. She wrote that Amanda had questioned her boarding pass twice, spoken slowly, loudly, as if volume translated into authority. She wrote that she had gone home and told herself it was nothing, that she was being sensitive. Then she saw the video. "I don't know why I'm writing," Denise said. "Maybe because you're the first person who didn't pretend nothing happened." Amanda read the message 3 times. The radiator hissed. Snow gathered on the sill. She typed a response and erased it. Typed again. Erased. Finally, she wrote back without explanation, without defense. "I'm listening," she wrote. "If you want to talk." They met at a cafe near the station, neutral ground. Denise arrived wrapped in a coat too thin for the cold, eyes guarded. Amanda stood when she saw her, then stopped herself, unsure which instinct belonged to the past and which to the present. They sat, ordered coffee, spoke slowly. Denise described the flight, the embarrassment that lingered longer than anger, the way it had changed how she traveled afterward. Amanda didn't interrupt, didn't apologize mid-sentence. She waited until Denise finished. "I can't fix it," Amanda said finally. "I know that, but I can hear it. All of it." Denise studied her face. "Why now?" "Because pretending didn't work," Amanda replied. They talked for an hour. Not reconciliation, not closure. Something quieter. When they stood to leave, Denise nodded once. "Don't waste it," she said. Amanda walked home through falling snow, the city muffled, her breath steady. She understood then that repair wasn't a moment. It was a practice. Across the ocean, Marcus Reed watched similar conversations unfold at scale. The airline's new reporting portal went live, and the volume surprised even him, not because of the number, but because of the detail. People wrote when they believed someone would read. He hired analysts and listeners in equal measure. People trained to hear patterns without reducing them to excuses. He insisted on rotating leadership reviews that included passenger feedback alongside operational metrics. The board resisted at first. He didn't argue. He showed them the numbers. Market trust rose. So did scrutiny. He welcomed both. On a winter evening, Marcus sat alone in a quiet terminal, reviewing scholarship applications. One essay caught his attention. The applicant wrote about her mother, a gate agent who had taught her to smile through disrespect, to keep her head down. The daughter wanted to become an engineer, not to build planes, but to build systems that didn't require smiling through harm. Marcus wrote a note in the margin. Admitted. In Manchester, Amanda attended another forum, then another. Not as a featured voice, as a volunteer. She set up chairs, made coffee, took notes no one asked her to take. People learned her name without context. That was intentional. One night, after a long shift, she received a call from an unfamiliar number. It was Jessica, the junior attendant from the flight. They hadn't spoken since the night everything collapsed. "I didn't know how to reach you," Jessica said, voice tight. I needed to say something." They spoke awkwardly at first, then honestly. Jessica talked about the pressure to defer, to stay quiet, about how that night had followed her too. Amanda listened. When the call ended, neither felt absolved. Both felt less alone. Spring came late. The city thawed. Planes traced familiar paths across clearer skies. Amanda found a second job, assisting at the aviation center on weekends. Paperwork, logistics, no authority. Plenty of responsibility. She liked it. One afternoon, a young man recognized her. Not from the video, from the cafe where she worked shifts to make rent. He hesitated, then smiled. "You helped me get to my interview," he said. "I start training next month." She wished him luck and meant it. The news cycle moved on, as it always did. Another scandal, another outrage. But some stories stayed in the background, doing their work quietly. The airline's complaints dropped in volume and sharpened in focus. Resolutions improved. Training changed. Not perfectly, persistently. At a conference in Chicago, Marcus spoke without slides. "The goal isn't to eliminate harm," he said. "That's not realistic. The goal is to make harm visible early, correctable, and costly to ignore." Afterward, a reporter asked about forgiveness. Marcus considered the question. "Forgiveness is personal," he said. "Systems don't require it. They require responsibility." In Manchester, Amanda stood at the bus stop again, flyer replaced by a new one. Open skies orientation. She watched a group of applicants gather, laughing, nervous, hopeful. She didn't join them. She didn't need to. Her phone buzzed. A message from Denise. "Thank you for listening." Another from Jessica. "Coffee sometime?" She smiled, small, unguarded. The past remained. It always would. But it no longer dictated every step. As evening fell, a plane lifted into the pinking sky, engines steady, path clear. On the ground, work continued. Quiet. Unfinished. And somewhere between altitude and asphalt, the distance between who people were and who they chose to become narrowed. Not by spectacle, but by the slow discipline of paying attention. The call came while Amanda Lewis was stacking chairs, the echo of metal legs scraping the floor sharp in the empty hall. She checked the number twice before answering. Unknown. Local. Her pulse didn't spike the way it used to. She had learned the difference between danger and attention. "This is Amanda," she said. "Ms. Lewis," a man replied, voice measured, professional. "My name is Thomas Keller. I work with the Civil Aviation Oversight Council. We're assembling a review panel for frontline accountability training. Your name was recommended." She closed her eyes for a second. Not relief. Not pride. Recognition, heavy and careful. Recommended by whom? "Mr. Reed," Keller said. "With conditions." "Of course," Amanda said. The conditions were clear. No authority, no decision power, no public role. She would sit in the room and answer questions when asked. She would speak only to what she had done, not what others should do. She would be there to illuminate failure, not to redesign systems. That belonged to people with cleaner hands. She agreed. The first session took place in a windowless room near the airport, the kind of place designed to neutralize hierarchy. Tables arranged in a square, water pitchers, name cards printed in the same font. Amanda's card bore only her name. No title. No qualifier. Around the table sat pilots, attendants, gate agents, compliance officers. Some avoided her eyes. Others studied her openly. She recognized a few faces from the night everything changed. No one spoke at first. The facilitator cleared her throat. "We're here to talk about how harm actually happens," she said. "Not how it's explained afterward." Amanda felt the familiar tightening in her chest. She breathed through it. A captain spoke first. "I've been flying for 25 years, he said. I never thought of myself as biased. I thought of myself as efficient. Heads nodded. Amanda nodded too. When it was her turn, she didn't rehearse. I believed my instincts were neutral, she said. I told myself experience made me objective. What it actually did was make my assumptions faster. A murmur moved around the table. Not agreement, consideration. What would have stopped you? Someone asked. She didn't answer immediately. A system that questioned me, she said finally. A colleague who felt safe enough to interrupt. A culture that didn't reward speed over accuracy. Silence followed. Not accusatory. Productive. After the session, a young attendant approached her, hands twisting together. I freeze, she said. When I see something wrong, I freeze. Amanda met her eyes. Freezing is a response, she said. It doesn't make you a villain. But unexamined freezing becomes policy. The attendant nodded, absorbing it like a bruise you don't yet feel. Across the Atlantic, Marcus Reed sat in a boardroom that smelled faintly of coffee and ozone. A new dashboard glowed on the screen, metrics updating in real time. Complaint response time, resolution rates, escalation pathways. He watched the numbers like a pilot watches instruments. Calm, constant. Markets like this, a board member said. Transparency reads as confidence. Marcus didn't smile. It reads as responsibility, he said. Confidence follows. He ended the meeting early and walked through the terminal without an escort. He liked the sound of rolling bags, the murmur of travelers. It grounded him. He stopped near a window where planes taxied, their tails painted with familiar insignia, now refreshed with a subtle change in color. A signal, not a slogan. A reporter caught up with him, breathless. Mr. Reed, she said, recorder already up. Do you believe in redemption? He considered the runway. I believe in consequence, he said. Redemption is private. Systems can't require it. They can only make space for different choices. Back in Manchester, Amanda stood in the small kitchen of her room, listening to the kettle click off. She poured water over a tea bag and watched the color spread. She thought about space. How much of her life had been about narrowing it? Who could move? Who had to wait? The review sessions continued. Each one chipped away at the illusion that harm was rare or dramatic. It wasn't. It was ordinary, repetitive, often boring. That was the hardest part to accept. One evening, after a long day, Amanda found herself alone in the hall, stacking chairs again. The work felt familiar now, honest. She thought of the first night she had blocked the aisle with her hand. How certain she had been. How wrong. Her phone buzzed. A message from Denise. I spoke today. Didn't shake. Thought you should know. Amanda sat on the floor, back against the wall, and let the moment pass through her. Not pride. Gratitude, quiet and undeserved. Another message followed, this one from the Oversight Council. Thank you for your participation. Further sessions to be scheduled. She replied with a single word. Understood. Weeks later, a training video circulated internally. No dramatics, no music, just footage of ordinary interactions, paused and discussed. Amanda appeared briefly, not as a villain, not as a hero, as an example of how certainty sounds before it becomes harm. She didn't watch it alone. She watched it with others. That mattered. At Burger Baron, Kyle announced he was leaving for a better job. "You should apply," he said, half joking. "You're good with people now." She smiled. "I'm learning." On her last shift of the week, a customer lingered after paying. "I saw you speak," he said. "At the airport thing." "Took guts." She shook her head. "It took consequence." Outside, dusk settled. The air smelled like rain. A plane climbed, engines steady, lights blinking against the darkening sky. Amanda watched it until it vanished, then turned back toward the street. There was still work to do. Not to erase the past. To keep it from repeating itself in quieter, more efficient ways. The night held. The systems held. And for the first time, the future did not feel like something she needed to guard. The morning light came in low and pale, catching dust in the air as Amanda Lewis unlocked the door to the community center. She moved slowly now, not from hesitation, but from intention. Chairs were stacked neatly along the wall, a whiteboard waiting blank and patient. Today's session would be small. No executives, no press. Just a handful of new hires, a few veterans, and one facilitator who understood that change rarely announced itself loudly. Amanda took her seat near the edge of the room, notebook closed. She wasn't here to speak unless asked. That had become her rule. As people filed in, she recognized the signs she once ignored. Nervous hands, forced smiles. The subtle tension of people stepping into spaces where power had always felt uneven. She felt no urge to categorize them. That instinct was gone, burned away by consequence. The facilitator began, voice steady. "This isn't about policies," she said. "It's about moments." Amanda listened. A young man spoke about his first week on the job, how he had followed instructions even when something felt off. A woman described the relief of finally being backed by a supervisor when she questioned a call. Others nodded, quietly recognizing themselves in the stories. When Amanda was invited to speak, she didn't stand. She stayed seated, grounding herself. "I used to think the job was about control," she said. "Keeping things moving. Keeping order. What I learned is that speed without reflection is just another form of negligence." No one interrupted. No one argued. They were listening, not to her authority, but to her failure. After the session, people lingered. Conversations continued in low tones, honest and unfinished. Amanda slipped out without ceremony and stepped into the street. The city moved around her, indifferent, alive. Across the Atlantic, Marcus Reed stood on a quiet stretch of tarmac, hands in his coat pockets, watching ground crews work. He preferred these moments. No cameras, no applause. Just the machinery of progress humming forward because someone had cared enough to redesign it. A colleague approached, holding a tablet. "The latest numbers are in," she said. "Complaints down. Resolution time cut in half." Marcus nodded. "And the narratives?" Changing, she said. Slowly. That's how it lasts, he replied. He boarded the plane without priority, took his seat, and looked out the window as the engine spooled. He thought of the night on Flight 909. The aisle. The hand raised. The certainty that had almost cost him his freedom. He didn't dwell on it. Memory, for him, was a tool, not a wound. The plane lifted smoothly, climbing into clean air. In Manchester, Amanda finished her shift at the aviation center and walked home as evening settled in. The sky burned briefly with color before fading to gray. A plane traced a thin white line overhead, barely visible. She stopped and watched it go. Her life was smaller now in the ways that mattered, and larger in ways she hadn't expected. No uniform, no shortcuts, no illusion of moral authority handed to her by fabric and title. Just days filled with attention and nights that allowed sleep without rehearsal. She passed the cafe where she and Denise had first talked. The window reflected her back at herself. Older, quieter, awake. At home, she sat at the small table and opened her notebook. She didn't write confessions anymore. She wrote observations, what she noticed, where systems bent, where silence crept back in. It wasn't dramatic work. It was necessary. Her phone buzzed once. A message from Jessica. Training went well today. Thank you. Another from the Oversight Council confirming the next session. She placed the phone face down and let the room settle around her. Somewhere, a television played an interview she didn't watch. Somewhere else, a scholarship recipient studied late into the night, believing for the first time that the sky wasn't reserved for someone else. The story of Flight 909 had become something larger than any one person. It wasn't about a villain or a hero. It was about how quickly power can harden into harm when left unchecked, and how quietly it can be redirected when people refuse to look away. Amanda stood by the window one last time before bed. Planes moved steadily across the dark, guided by systems designed to correct for error, to anticipate failure, to protect lives that would never know the names of the people who built those systems. She turned off the light. If this story stayed with you, press like to help it travel further. Subscribe to stay with us as we keep telling stories where accountability matters. And in the comments, write 3 words. Truth always wins.